remain to be a concern and a focus. However, we have a new emerging impairment piece, and it's very much a growing problem, and that is that of drugged driving, where now we not only have marijuana seems to take most of the oxygen out of the room. We'll talk about that just a little bit and why it's so difficult, but a lot of people now are treating conditions, a lot more people over the past few years, with opiate drugs. Opiate addiction is a problem, and there are a number of problems associated with that, and I'm not here to be critical of the medical profession, but I'm here to tell you that too many people who are treating those conditions don't understand the level of impairment they're experiencing. And they get behind the wheel of a car, and they are very much a threat to themselves and anyone else who's sharing the road with them. And so what I'm trying to do as a legislator now is to be a voice for the public in a way that we can arm our law enforcement with the tools necessary to identify those people and to remove them if necessary. We would rather educate the public so that they don't put themselves in that position. That would be the optimum piece, that people would understand. There's still a number of people that think that marijuana is not impairing at all. And that's very dangerous. So we're trying to do some things, and we've accomplished a number of things already. I was part of the team that was able to get some sensible regulatory control into the medical marijuana system. I was very proud of that. It took 20 years to happen, and it's still those regulatory controls aren't in place yet. And guess what the public does? They decided not only are we going to not wait for these controls to take place, we're going to say it's okay for everyone over 21 to buy it for whatever reason. So it's complicated, our challenge here in the legislature, trying to bring some kind of sensible control. My focus remains more on the impaired driving aspect of both, quite honestly. And one thing about marijuana is it's a very unique substance in the way that it manifests itself, in the way that it's tested and evaluated. We want to compare marijuana with alcohol, because we've learned a great deal about alcohol. We've done a lot of research, and I have a lot of experience, we have a lot of data on that. But unfortunately, marijuana is so unique in the fact that its impairing aspects are only manifest for a few hours. Unlike alcohol, it depends on your metabolism, but it has a pretty constant rate to which that impairment stays in your system depending on your size and the amount that you consume. It's much easier to measure. With marijuana, the problem is it's also subject to usage, how long you've used. And so therefore, somebody who's a brand new user may be severely impaired much quicker than someone who's been using marijuana for a long time. The other thing we have is right now through blood testing, the traditional blood testing, it just recognized THC levels, period, and not necessarily the active or the impairing aspects of this particular drug. And so what I'm really trying to focus on is not marijuana usage, but marijuana impairment, because they're two very different things. And we have too many people, even legislators throughout the country, who are trying to establish a per se limit, like the 0.08. And unfortunately, because of the unique nature that I've tried to describe to you, that's not going to be indicative of impairment. And if we try to put in some legislation that is not meaningful, we've done ourselves a great disservice and the public a great disservice. And so I'm trying to really do the right thing, and as soon as possible, because as you well know, government, especially at the state level, is very slow. And it's very, very frustrating, because the slower we move, the more people are put at threat. And there's going to be tragedies. They're already occurring. We had one in my district. We had a lady that came in and she testified. It was unfortunate. It was on the 14 in the Acton area. Her husband was working on the side of the road and was struck and killed while performing his duty by someone who was under the influence of marijuana, only marijuana. And it's very tragic in that because we don't have the tools, we don't have the data this prosecution has become very, very difficult. And so we're trying to get everything in line so that we can arm not only law enforcement, but also the court system to hold people accountable when they make poor choices and when they are responsible for having tragic victims like this poor lady. It's really important to me. So we're moving the ball in that direction. We have the UC San Diego study that's already underway as a result of the first medical marijuana legislation. But their findings aren't going to be available till at least the end of this year. So, and that started a while back. So everything moves at a snail's pace, in my opinion, but at least it's moving. I didn't know, I mean, I've been rejected a number of times, like the legislation I have in process now is to allow the Highway Patrol to establish a task force to evaluate technology that's available right now and to allow law enforcement to use those tools to help identify. There are tools right now that can identify this impairing aspect of marijuana. But it keeps getting rejected here because the process is very difficult, I'll just say that. But we actually finally got this legislation because we changed the way that it would be administered. We actually identified an agency, and it passed unanimously, where it's failed every time so far. So we're very thrilled that it's moving, and I'm very optimistic.
We've got about 5 minutes. Can we open up to some questions?
That's up to you. This is your thing, of course.
You guys, any of you have some questions?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a hint at the type of metric you might use? In other words, 0.08 is for alcohol. Is there some metric you're thinking of?
No, and that's the problem, is this research, it doesn't have that ability. Here's the metric that we want to use, is right now we want to show presence of this active ingredient that causes impairment, and then there have to be field sobriety tests developed that address impairment related to marijuana, because it's different. I mean, walking a straight line is not the problem. But however, what happens is when you're under the influence of marijuana, you have a tendency to do what's called high stepping. And so there's some very different ways that it manifests itself, and we need to educate our law enforcement in that aspect as well. And so that's what this research is also doing. It's developing field sobriety tests that are specific to marijuana, and quite frankly, the combination of marijuana and alcohol, because that's going to become a growing problem.
Right.
Yes?
I understand that in Colorado there's research now. One of the unexpected side effects of marijuana law there is that THC is showing up in babies, in newborn babies. Is there anything, I mean, is that known here, and is it being looked at?
You know, there's so many studies that are going on right now as far as because of the retail aspect of marijuana. Edibles are another very difficult thing for us to try to wrap our head around. Because one of the problems with edibles is they have some of them have very high concentrations of THC with the active ingredient. But they manifest, when you eat it, it takes a lot longer before it actually starts showing the impacts of the impairment, sometimes up to 2 hours. And so what will happen is, to someone who's not familiar with cannabis, they'll take some edibles and they don't feel the impact, so they take a few more, and before you know it, they're in a toxic condition, and it's a threat to their actual health, not even addressing the impairment aspect. So there's a lot to learn about cannabis, and I'm afraid we took a pretty big bite a little bit before we should have. But hey, we've got to minimize our damages, and we need to, it's already in, so we can complain all we want. Let's not waste our time complaining. Let's actually do it and trying to address issues that are going to keep us safer and help prevent tragedy. Yes, sir?
So what happens when an officer stops somebody who suspects that they have some sort of drug impairment? What can he do? What tools does he have to use so it keeps that person off the road and doesn't engage other people in driving?
I'll be honest with you. Right now, if it's just cannabis impairment, most officers have difficulty identifying if it's just cannabis only. They just do. And that's very concerning to me. And so we're going to have a number of tragedies. We don't even have good data on that. We may be having all sorts of collisions, even involving injury, that were the direct result of cannabis, but because the officer may not have been, completely aware of what to look for, that this person may have escaped any kind of recognition at all.